That is what it's about. If you go to the NRA website, they have different websites that are different silos where their money comes in and where it gets spent. And their number one mission is gun safety. So let's not forget that that's what the NRA is about and what their members are.
I think their number one mission is to sell guns.
And
that's why so many of these gun companies support the NRA.
Background checks are antithetical to gun safety?
No, the gun safety is how to use a weapon, how to care for a weapon, how to make sure those around you are safe. That's the gun safety aspect.
Background checks right now. What does that have to do with gun safety?
The background check issue is one of specific background checks versus the legislation it is part of. And if you look at the history, when they had talked about doing it before, the federal government wouldn't work with them to do it when it was first talked about years ago. This time around, you're talking about a whole different scenario where the NRA didn't support it. And they chose not to, and that's what their members wanted. They represent their members. That's what they're doing.
Last question on this subject. I don't often agree with Wayne LaPierre. I don't usually give what he says a lot of credence, but his argument about the events in Watertown, when everybody was in lockdown for 24 hours, and how many people in Watertown wish they had a gun, that struck me as being a potentially effective argument. I'm curious if it struck anybody else as being effective.
I thought it was the biggest joke I ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
Imagine 10 people, let's say 10, but it'd be many more. Let's say it's 1,000. None of them were trained in firearms, and they all have guns. Oops, I thought you were the suspect. What happens then?
We have to have faith in law enforcement.
Right, and they got the job done.
And they got the job done. Absolutely right. And it is just, again, not helpful for these people to be just creating a riot around a very sensitive situation when we have law enforcement, we have a system for figuring these out, for working on these things, and making sure the right people are caught and put to justice.
Do you really think in Rockland County where people have weapons more so than New York City or in Boston that people would have been felt safer? And do you think that somebody on the run from the law is going to start going house to house when they know they got weapons? And take Rockland County and move down to Texas where people have weapons, and Florida, where it's easier to get, it's less densely populated. Do you really think a thief is going to break into a house as easily there as they are in New York City and other places? I mean, that's part of it too, don't forget. Part of it is the deterrent that there is a threat that if somebody is going to shoot me when I break into their place, I better not do it.
I'm not so sure it's about the deterrent. I think it might be people who feel more confident in a situation like Watertown if they have a gun in their house. They might feel more confident that they'll be safer, or at least that they have something that they can do about it. And I'm not saying I agree with the argument.
But Andrew, let's just look at the statement. Let's put it on the surface here. So the police that evening, they believe that the suspect in Watertown is in the area. And so all the residents are supposed, based on Mr. LaPierre, are supposed to run out, and we're now all agents.
He didn't say that. He wasn't talking about forming a posse. He was saying he thought that people might feel safer knowing that.
Of course, you're worried about that knock on the door. Then that becomes a question of safety. So will you feel safer at home if you've got the weapon when there's a manhunt going on in your neighborhood?
And what if the suspect takes the gun from you?
Well, you shoot him before
it's been shown time and time again that it is more likely you'll be killed with your own gun than you will defend yourself.
How many people at this table have fired a weapon and been involved in any of this?
I've fired a weapon.
I'm from New Hampshire, I'm not from New York.
And it scared the hell out of me. I don't like doing it because anyone that's fired a gun knows the massive power.
And this isn't about whether or not people should have guns.
And you can't, once you pull that trigger, you can't take it back. And in firing a gun in the state of Pennsylvania at gun ranges, you fire the weapons in your arm immediately, and if you have a rifle, it can almost push your shoulder completely back.
I've gone hunting, sure. I fired a shotgun. I was in the Army. I fired an M16 in the Army. I fired an M203.
This is not about if people should have guns. Of course they should. They can have guns. It's who should have the guns and making sure the wrong people don't get guns. And that's all the White House has been saying this whole time. And it's been just tossed aside by these radical positions.
The White House
we need to get
trying to work with people. The White House has been trying to steamroll people. That is one of the differences.
By creating a bipartisan committee, by bringing in the NRA to the White House to have talks about it?
They bring them in. They sit them down. They say, we're going to talk around you on this thing. They're not going to work with them.
And the school safety provision is in there because of those discussions.
But they were not having conversations. They were doing it their way. It was their way or the highway.
Well, they are the executive branch, and they were elected by the majority of the people, and that's their job to lead.
And don't forget, the White House also got criticized in parts for not sort of trying to impose its will.
This goes back to this White House not knowing how to work with legislators. That's right. They control one branch. But there's another branch that they don't control. Right? It's split. It's divided government. They have to know to work across. The president today was playing golf for the first time with other members, 2 Republican senators. He hasn't done that. He's been there for 5 years now.
That's not true. He played a round of golf with John Boehner.
Well,
he
no,
absolutely did.
the senators.
He absolutely did.
No, I know he did. I know he did. But the senators he's playing with today have talked about playing with him before. It was actually written in the Washington Post 2 weeks ago. He must have taken his advice from the Washington Post.
Who knew the solution for all our ailments was just a round of golf?
And the dinners he's been having now too. He has not done the things in Washington that need to be done to build relationships. When I was down in North Carolina this past
Did President Bush do those things?
Bush had people over to the House, the White House,
You're
to
saying
watch
his
the Super
position
Bowl.
is wrong, or now you're criticizing
No. What
him
I'm
as a
saying
leader?
is the positions are one thing, and we have disagreements. But to get together, like Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch used to get together, it does not happen nowadays in Washington.
When people,
the men and women in this
people are
country,
saying 9 out of 10 times they want a background check in the United States, it is up to the Congress to listen to them. The Congress is not doing that, and that's the problem. The House of Representatives and Republican leadership.
I got to drop the curtain on this. I'm sorry. We're just out of time. We're going to take a break. Up next, Immigration Nation. Can the Gang of Eight in the Senate get it done? And will efforts to include provisions for same-sex couples actually kill the immigration bill? That's next. Stay with us.